isn't his tendon torn? Like the medial, isn't it? Don't you need your medial like
Your
tibia?
torn medial retina column allowing dislocation of the posterior tibialis tendon. Yeah, that
How
is
is the
his
retina in
official.
his foot and not in his eye, man? I'm so
Yo,
confused.
his third eye is open right now.
Bro, it's legit torn. Natalie and Bruglia.
Oh my god.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, William Liu. Today, I'm joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong. You're listening to the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway. Make sure you find Hello and Welcome wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe, please, rate, review, and just comment on our show. Just engage with the show. You know, we're growing on YouTube. We're growing on Twitter. We're growing on Instagram, TikTok. The shorts are awesome. The main videos and the podcast, it's gaining more and more traction. And I'm learning how to become more of a YouTuber by begging people to subscribe to the channel by any means necessary. Alex Wong, my producer. What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Hey, what's up, man? Last week we were ranking the finals of the past decade and trying to actively avoid talking about these finals because, they've been tough. And heading into game 4, the Celtics were up 3-0. Our guy Bill Simmons was posting photos of like Keith Bogans, signing with the Celtics in 2013, just starting the whole journey to get to this championship. And you thought that the finals couldn't get any worse. And then it kind of did. The Mavs just, blew out the Celtics. And now we're in this like existential dread of the series continuing on, even though I don't think, that game 4 win really going to change anything, unless you think differently.
Well, first, this is what I thought of the game, okay? Because it took place on a Friday night, and I had a decision between, do I suit up for Score FC?
Oh, that's a no-brainer. That's a
my
no-brainer.
soccer club.
Yeah.
Or do I stay at home and watch game 4? And yeah, I made the right choice. 3-1 victory at Score FC, Captain Cash with a nice goal, top bins to secure the win there. But when I came home and I caught up with it, the fact that it was a blowout, I think people are going to definitely lean towards the Celtics just mailed it in, and the Mavs definitely played well. A lot of the role players played well. I even saw Maxi Kleber, friend of the program, enemy of the program, really. Not hello and welcome. I guess what's the opposite of hello welcome to Maxi Kleber? But even he knocked down a 3. Dante Exum was knocking down 3s. Josh Green was making great plays. So you could say the Mavs role players definitely played a lot better at home. But I also thought that the Mavericks aren't even playing the Celtics that badly in the series anymore. Game 1 was certainly an avalanche, and a lot of that was Kristaps just going crazy. Kristaps obviously, made available but didn't play in game 4. And when you take him out of the equation, you look at the way the Celtics played, I think the Mavericks have learned to play them better and better. It's a little bit too late just because they did fall into a 3-0 hole, but I thought they figured some things out. The guys got to the rim a lot better. You saw Luka and Kyrie just parade to the basket. Boston's help defense was just not there, and it took 1 or 2 moves usually for Luka and Kyrie to beat their guys on the perimeter. And of course, that's the whole thing with Boston is they want to have really aggressive perimeter defense, keep guys in front, so they limit how much help they bring. But at the same time, it's still Luka and Kyrie, and I think over the course of the series, they're going to figure out more and more ways. One of the things they're doing to Kyrie is to try to force him really strong to his left hand. And, for the most part, Kyrie's mostly not getting downhill going to his right hand. But guess what? Kyrie's ambidextrous. So when he goes downhill against Drew Holiday, when he goes downhill against Derek White, he's still actually getting to the basket. And that's where the lack of help, because there's no Porzingis, because Al Horford honestly looks like honestly looks like Patrick Patterson at this point. It's just not really there for them. And so, yeah, Dallas, I think, is learning how to play Boston better and better. It's just a shame that they're already 3 losses in,
Yeah, Kristaps, like you mentioned, was available, but they, Joe Mazzulla said only in specific situations. And, for anyone who's ever come back from a torn medial retina column allowing dislocation of the posterior tibialis tendon, it is a risky thing to try to come back and play from that, after a few days after the injury. But I think, if you think that this series is in play, or at least, at risk of now going a bit further, I think having him back will be really important. But I know the Mavs role players all played really well, and like apologies to Maxi Kleber. I thought Derek Lively was really good. You got moments from like Derek Jones, PJ Washington, and did you know, fun fact, Tim Hardaway Jr. is now one of 3 players in finals history to have hit 5 threes in a single quarter, next to Steph Curry and Ray Allen. So somehow he joined history yesterday by coming in garbage time. But my big question for Dallas going back to Game 5 is like, can Kyrie have a good performance on the road? Like he looked way more comfortable in games 3 and 4. It's just been several years now of him not performing well in Boston. So like whatever that is, whether it's the defense, the crowd, the combination of it, like the formula is still the same for Dallas. Like, they need Luka and Kyrie, who were amazing in the first half, to push them to that lead, and then they need the role players as well. But without Kyrie, without that piece, like I don't think they're winning another game.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. Like, you need obviously both of them playing. Like, remember when the Cavs made that 3-1 comeback? Like, there were games where Kyrie and LeBron both had 40. You know what I mean? Like, that's the level that you're going to need to play at, especially on the road. But we know Kyrie is capable of it. I think, look, him playing in Boston and the animosity that comes with that, like, I think it's an undeniable factor. You even hear reports from, like, reporters or people who were at the games that, like, he was kind of going back and forth with fans. Now, that's natural to some degree, but I think we all know that it's especially spicy with Boston. So, yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. I think, for me, I really want to see Derek Lively continue to have a big impact, because I thought he was, like, if we had to hand out 3 stars, obviously Luka and Kyrie are going to grab the first 2, no problem. But Derek Lively is a clear-cut number 3 star for this team. And his injection of energy coming off the bench is such a key thing. It's not even necessarily that, like, you can always bank on specifically what plays he makes, but it's the impact where he just, like, first minute he comes off the bench in Game 4, gets an offensive rebound, knocks down a corner 3, which, I mean, hey, that's really impressive for him, because he hasn't really taken many of those. I actually saw him shoot a whole bunch of corner 3s and, like, top of the floor 3s in Summer League when I watched him last year, but, that has not been...
The warm-up god is back.
The warm-up report for a Mavs player. No, but seriously, like, he hasn't shot those in-game, but obviously that hasn't been his role. He knocks down the corner 3. He then blocks Xavier Tillman on a layup. Then he lob dunks, rolling to the basket from Kyrie. Like, that bit of, like, injection of energy is so key. And I think for Lively, the only thing is he gets a little overactive. He gets a little jumpy. When he gets into sort of like one-on-one, he actually keeps guys in front pretty well. He had a possession against Tatum where he like slid his feet and kept Tatum in front and forced Tatum to pass out late clock. But there are times where he just is a little too eager to jump and block the shot. But I think he gave them a huge bump in the first half. And then Gafford, shouts to the gaffer, okay? But like the block on Tatum's step back,
this
that
guy
was crazy.
This guy had his own 2016 Game 7, man. I swear, he had like the block, the shot, the stop.
How do you have a chase down block on a step back 3? Like, that was impressive. So, like, yeah, I mean, the Mavs need more of that because, again, like, they have a clear advantage at center, especially now that Kristaps is out. And now there's, like, not quite all 5 guys can guard that well. Like, Horford maybe can give you a little bit, but, like, some of these games, Horford is just absolutely getting roasted, you know? And
no, that's why I think that they do need Porzingis, maybe.
But the guy has a torn,
like,
isn't his tendon torn? Like, the medial, isn't it? Don't you need your medial? Like...
Your torn medial retina column allowing dislocation of the posterior tibialis tendon. Yeah.
How is the retina in his foot and not in his eye, man? I'm so confused.
Yo, his third eye is open right now.
Bro, it's legit torn. Natalie and Bruglia.
Oh my god. But yeah, I'm not really overreacting to this. Like, I think, Celtics, you take the 3-0 lead, maybe it's, human nature, just let down a little bit. Mm-hmm. We've seen this in other series and stuff. I would fully expect them to close out the series tonight. Like, there's just nothing from that Game 4 where I'm taking away and saying that, hey, things have turned now. Now, if the Mavs can win Game 5, get one in Boston, Boston has one of their, 3 of 41 from 3 nights, and we go back to Dallas, then maybe, but, I think this was just kind of, series gets extended, everybody gets to travel to Boston, and now we get to see a celebration in Boston.
Yeah, I mean, Look, I'm just hoping for, again, another Kyrie masterclass. I think the storylines would be way better if the Mavericks made, more of an effort. And honestly, it would be the most Celtics thing possible to build a huge lead and then start blowing it and make everyone sweat for no reason. Because that's their whole MO, right? So why not do it in the macro sense as well?
Yeah, and quick finals MVP watch. Drew Holiday, one of the contenders, was a -38 last night. Do you think that hurts his case?
I mean,
can you win MVP after having a -38?
I don't think any of the quote-unquote MVP candidates look particularly good on the Celtics side. I mean, Tatum 4 of 10. By the way, I'm really enjoying the moments where Tatum and Luka get to play one-on-one both ways, because I feel like even though Luka has been roasted on defense, I feel like he actually really relishes the chance to guard him one-on-one against Tatum.
Well, maybe he should just relish guarding in general. Yeah.
Yeah,
how about that? Not to be Brian Windhorst, but how about that?
But Luka, you understand that Luka's playing on an epidural, right? Like, this guy is literally getting pain meds just to go out there and strap it up for a 3-0 loss where he gets, ejected for fouls. No, but like, actually, no, that's the thing with Tatum. I mean, or with Doncic, is like, he actually didn't complain as much to the refs this time. Maybe it's because the Mavs were up like 20 most of the game, but like, he did a much better job of responding, and whatever. I mean, honestly, if he just wasn't such a big baby in Game 3, like, this series could be a 2-2 and it could be at a classic right now.
Yeah.
But instead, he like made way too many mistakes in Game 3, so it's a shame. But I mean, yeah, I liked his defense against Tatum. But yeah, Jaylen Brown also struggled a ton. I don't know, man. The Celtics, like, I'm hoping that the Mavericks have figured more things out, because low-key Game 2 was closer, and then Game 3 was fully winnable for the Mavs. And then Game 4, they smacked the Celtics. I love the cumulative score right now is that the Mavericks have actually outscored the Celtics despite being down 3-1.
Okay, that's my least favorite stat next to, I know, your least favorite stat, which is how we combine the Celtics regular season and playoff record. I believe they're 79-21, by the way.
Yeah,
now,
it's a lot.
So.
Yeah, that's a nasty number, man. Did we ever say that the Bulls, when they were 72-10, like, we didn't say what their cumulative record was?
No, like they were 105-12. No, but I think do you think one of these writers who has a vote for Finals MVP, maybe a Tim Bontemps, might go off the board and write Brad Stevens as Finals MVP? Do you think someone's gonna do something radical like that? Yeah.
No. Come on, man. We all know, like. I mean, honestly, this whole Finals MVP discussion isn't even moving me. Like, I'm just not that invested in who gets
Finals MVP discussions only happen when the series gets a little boring. This is what happens.
Yeah. So now we can hopefully discuss the elements. I think for Dallas too, they gotta play fast. Because when they do that, Boston's defense doesn't get set. But again, like, who knows, man? Let's just do everything in our power to get it to a Game 6, please. Like, if we get Scott Foster again as the official, like, is that suspicious or?
Yeah, I don't know. It hasn't been suspicious, I guess, for years, even though he was closely associated to Tim Donaghy, even though he called Tim Donaghy 75 times a day.
I don't even call you that many times a day, man.
We only DM, man.
I don't even DM you 75 times a day.
Well, some other storylines that came out of, these last few days and during the finals, after Game 4, Charles Barkley, who always is very excited to go on vacation after TNT wraps up its coverage in the Western Conference Finals, and somehow still shows up for NBA TV during the finals, which I don't really understand. He did say post-game that next season, being TNT's likely last year of covering the NBA, is going to be his last year of television, and he's not going to be joining other networks. Are we taking Charles seriously on this, or do you think this is a negotiating tactic? Because he would be the #1 coveted free agent in sports media.
Are you saying that this is when he comes back like Jordan wearing the 4-5 moment? Or
yeah, when he comes back on ESPN wearing the 4-5.
Or is this Alex Wong negotiating live on air for a contract extension?
Yeah.
Two seasons ago.
I was going back and forth with Sportsnet for like an extra $1,000. These are not the same discussions. Please.
Yeah, I think they could throw one G at Charles. I mean, man, how old is Charles? Like, I feel like doing TV, it's not the most like painstaking thing. I guess he still has his podcast as well. So I guess he maybe just transitions to just potting, but like
He's been doing this for 25 years, by the way. So next year will be 25.
so he's been doing TV longer than he's been playing basketball, basically. When you combine his college,
Yeah,
and, like,
he
actual
basically
NBA career.
retired. He basically retired and then pretty much immediately joined TV. Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, he's only on TV like twice a week. You know what I mean? Like how?
you're really making his job sound easier than it is.
No, I mean, come on, man. It's twice a week. He watches the game, and then he like
He barely watches the games.
and then he teases Shaq and tells Kenny to get me. Get me
No,
some
man,
water.
I'm not
Like,
gonna stand for this Charles Barkley slander, man.
No. I'm not saying that's not slander at all. Everyone loves that, including me. I just think that like,
Yeah.
why retire for that? Especially if you're gonna get a huge bag, you know. But I understand if like because inside the NBA might be gone, then like he doesn't want to fully continue. But like, yeah, it'll be a shame. But ultimately, like he's made more than enough money. He's got family. He's got grandkids. I'm sure he wants to spend time with. Like, whatever. But I also think that like even if he retires, there's nothing keeping him back from unretiring after he gets bored. So I wouldn't like fully shut the door, but it would be really, really sad to lose Charles. Again, like he's somebody that I feel like there's so many players now that want to do media, right? Like you see Paul George on the pregame show, and then he's getting rizzed by Joel Embiid like on the pregame show, and like Josh Hart's on the pregame show. Like, you know what I mean? Like so many players want to transition to doing media, but so few look specifically at like what it would take to be successful in that model. And I think Charles is like the ultimate model for that, right? You're open with your stories. You're able to make jokes at your own expense. You're able to sort of like, throw yourself into the moment and really, lean into personality wise. You're not afraid to look a little silly, because that's ultimately like what you want to see. Like, yeah, you already have credibility because you played and because you know the game inside out, but where's your personality going to be at? You know what I mean? And I think that like, Charles is such a good example of that, and I just hope that like other players can sort of emulate at least some of the elements that makes them successful. But I feel like so many players when they go on TV, they're number one, they're really stiff, or number two, they're maybe really nervous, and of course some of that will come away with time and experience. But then the other part is just they're just so like they're so focused on like bragging about themselves or like making themselves look great that like you don't understand, like being self-flagellating actually can be very, very relatable to the average audience who obviously aren't NBA players, who obviously aren't like superstars or anything like that. The fact that Charles Barkley was a superstar and goes on TV every single night and is willing to get clowned on, that actually makes him so relatable. And I feel like most players, they're just so like worried about how they come across egotistically that like you're not getting that same effect. So it obviously, I think there's just players can learn a lot from Charles,
Yeah, speaking of egos, former Celtic Grant Williams told FanDuel's flagship NBA show, Run It Back. Yo, we used to have a show called that. This week,
It's all good.
that he wanted a tribute video from the Celtics when he came back to Boston this year. He said, quote, "It definitely sucked because it would have been cool to see the highlights and the highs that we had throughout that team. Should the Boston Celtics have given Grant Williams a tribute video?"
So what's the tribute video gonna look like? They're gonna put that video, that music.
So here's what the tribute
again. And then
yeah.
it's
So we're gonna have that music. Jerome, put that music when you do the clip, and then the 5 clips that we're gonna have for the tribute video. Number 1, Grant Williams doing his post game presser as Batman on Halloween. Number 2, Grant Williams shooting 7 of 18 from 3 in Game 7 against the Bucks.
7 corner threes, man.
Number 3, Grant Williams getting stomped on like Android 16 by Joel Embiid.
Let's make sure we get Jaylen Brown's reaction to
Oh
that too.
my god! Yeah, his reaction in the background, and then maybe a side-by-side cut of him jawing with Draymond in the finals, and also jawing with Jimmy Butler in the Eastern Conference Finals.
We're missing a key highlight here, man.
What are we missing here?
We're missing. I'm gonna make both. To
Oh
Donovan Mitchell.
yes. Going to the free throw line against the Cavs, he was being taunted by Donovan Mitchell and claimed that he was going to make both. And if I have it correct, did he miss both?
He missed both. It went to overtime, and the Celtics lost. Like,
how does Grant Williams have such an America's Funniest Home Video reel going, man?
no, the funniest thing about Grant Williams is like, yeah, he's super annoying, and yeah, like he has these moments. He's a solid player. There's no doubt. But like, he also like he's doing all this, but he looks like the thumb monsters from Spy Kids. Like so, like
I love
man.
I love how like Pokemon better than me, but like all these
Oh,
different
absolutely.
Pokemons have different attributes and things like that. Like I
Yeah,
love how Grant Williams' attribute is just annoying.
yeah. No, that's honestly, and it's not even just because he's a solid player. Like he's not like he's like a role player, but like
Right.
he's a solid role player, defense well, whatever. But like, yeah, even on the court, you can see how annoying he is. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like you look at all these moments, right? But
And it's not like the Mavs didn't like need depth either. Like they could have used a Grant Williams
yeah,
like to have on the team, but like he annoyed Lucas so much that he had to go.
he told Luca, he's like, I think he got beat by Luca when playing 1-on-1, and then he stopped wearing Luca's Jordans and started wearing
He started wearing
Tatum's.
Tatum's. Oh my
How could you be that annoying? That's your teammate, man. Just support your teammate. This got me thinking, like, what's the worst player you've seen get a tribute video?
That's a good question. I don't know.
'Cause-
I feel like teams usually draw the line pretty well. Like if you think about the Raptors, has there been a tribute video where you're like, oh, this doesn't seem appropriate? Because like I feel like the Raptors draw the line pretty well.
Did DeLon Wright get a tribute video when he came back to Toronto?
That's questionable.
Okay,
I feel like he might not have.
Norm got a tribute video, but I think that's totally fine.
Yeah,
I
I think anyone on the championship
they
team
also
is
won a
totally
chip
fine.
together. Exactly, that's the thing. When you win a chip together and you contribute to that, like absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
once a rap, always a rap. You know, that's what
okay,
that's what they say. Yeah.
That's the next show that we do. Once once a rap,
Yeah,
always a
but
rap
it's a food
podcast.
show.
God damn.
It's a Jiang Bing show. Klay Thompson. It was
Yeah.
noticed by Andy Liu and sleuths out in the Bay Area has unfollowed the Warriors on Instagram as he heads into free agency and deleted all Warriors related content from his page. How do you enjoy this free agency season when we start tracking players and free agents and their social media content?
First off, like first off, do players need to be this dramatic? You know what I mean? Like, I'm just imagining Klay on his boat, like thinking about all the times that they won titles together, and just like his finger hovering over the unfollow
Been
button.
a
Like,
long day.
yo, honestly, if anyone should get a tribute video, it should be Klay Thompson. In fact, there should be like a whole documentary. I also think that like, yo, Klay, at your big age, like, do you need to do this? Like, come on, man. Like even if he moves on, it'll be sad, right? Because everyone wanted to see all the Warriors like go out together and continue to ride. Clearly, like it's not really working, and you know, I don't think that like it's like a particularly good moment to extend Klay when he struggled so much. The last game he played for them was like 0 for 10, you know, in the play-in game. But like you're 34, like at a certain point, like you gotta, you know what I mean? Like the Warriors have taken care of him this whole time. Like they've even given him, you know, the huge contract after the 2019 run, which was awesome, but he's been injured over the bulk of that contract. And yes, he was healthy for that 1 year and they won the title together. It was great. But like, you know, you just would have liked to see them all ride out together. Like whichever team that Klay Thompson goes to next, it'll be like Tony Parker playing in the Charlotte Hornets jersey. Like what's up with that? You know what I mean? Like you just want to see him like in one jersey. And yeah, it seems like he is going to move on. So I don't know. Where do you think he's going to go?
You're not excited to see Klay in Orlando?
That's what I'm saying. Like, what are we doing, man?
I
That's
think
exactly Tony Parker in a Charlotte Hornets jersey.
Well, I think less about like where he's gonna go to next. It's just it's always sad seeing a player of like Klay's caliber like in this part of his career. He's like struggled so much the last few years, just like finding the right role. And there's games where he's still trying to shoot himself, you know, into these hot streaks that like just aren't there anymore. So like without those skill sets, like sure, he's still a useful player, but he's not as good a shooter, as good as a defensive player. Like I don't even know what that role would be on another team, even if he were to get the money and be happy with that.
Yeah, the Warriors are bringing him off the bench. I mean, he's still obviously a really good three-point shooter. You could say he chases some threes, but overall, he still took 9 threes and shot 39%. You know, like, so he would walk into most teams as their best three-point shooter. But, like, yeah, everyone who watches Klay, you can tell the impact just isn't quite the same. Defensively, he's probably not the same either. And again, it's just so sad because like we saw Pete Klay in the 2019 finals, man. Like I was more terrified of Klay than I was of Steph in that finals, especially that game 6 before he got injured. He was just, remember this one play where he just ran down the court like in semi-transition. He had the ball and he just pulled up from like 35 over poor helpless Fred VanVleet, who like had no chance of contesting the shot. Klay was red hot in that one. And then when he came out and he like took those 2 free throws, I mean that moment in the Oracle when he came out of the tunnel and shot those 2 free throws, like I don't know, I was stunned. It was like watching like a superhero movie where like somehow he like emerges from the rubble and still managed to throw like one more last punch. And yeah, that game he was 30 points, 8 of 12 from the field, 4 of 6 from 3, 10 of 10 from the foul line, and again the last 2 with the torn Achilles. And then yeah, that was. I mean, I don't want to say that was Danny Green's biggest contribution, but like that actually was a huge swing factor in that game alone. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I mean, I have a ton of respect for Klay, but don't beat Tony Parker in a Hornets jersey, man. People are gonna use him in photoshops down the line. Like it's gonna be like when Hakeem went up against Patrick Ewing.
Oh yeah,
Patrick Ewing also in a Magic jersey.
Somehow they're both icing their knees on the court, man.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh man,
Klay, don't do this.
Oh man. All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, Will's got some Raptors stuff to talk about on part 2 of Slow Raptors Newsweek.
All right, yeah, it's time for me to shoehorn Raptors content into the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway. We'll be back after these commercials. Welcome back to the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway. It's your host, Will, joined by co-host Alex Wong. All right, it's time for me to shoehorn Raptors content. Even though there is no Raptors news to come out of this, we will have more Raptors coverage. Off-season strategy coming up next week. Hopefully some interviews coming up next week as well. Really excited for week 4 of Hello and Welcome Pod. But I wanted to ask you this question, Alex, because Louis Atzman over at Raptors Republic caused not a bit of a stir, but like at least raised an interesting question of like, and the headline for the story over at Raptors Republic, which you should go subscribe to and everything like that. Well, I think this is actually an open story. The headline is the Raptors probably want to be bad next year too. And the idea obviously is just that the next year's draft is really strong, right? I don't know if you've looked into the 2025 draft yet.
Is this the Cooper flag draft?
There you go. It's the Cooper flag draft. We're gonna, people getting excited about that. He did play 1-on-1 against RJ Barrett, 2 dookies just like working out together, I guess.
2 dookies?
Don't they call them dookies? I don't know.
I don't think so, man.
Oh, word? All right.
Maybe Blue Devils.
This ain't the Wire? All
Dookie?
Right. All right. Let me just set up the segment, man. So the idea is like maybe the Raptors are bad next year. Maybe they add an even top pick next year. But of course, if you want to do that, you need to plan ahead of time to be able to, essentially kneecap your roster. Because even the Raptors winning only 25 games this year, that took a lot of things happening, a lot of trades, a lot of moves that were made that didn't work out, and then a lot of untimely injuries. That eventually led to the situation where the Raptors had to lose a franchise record 15. Well, actually, it's not a franchise record, but like second longest losing streak in franchise history of 15 games, a franchise worst 48-point loss, and all that. And the Raptors still actually ended up sliding in the lottery. They moved back and gave up the pick number 8 to San Antonio. At least they control their picks, and next year's draft's really strong. So, Alex, like, do you see this as a scenario where the Raptors should? Not that they might, because we know that the Raptors are willing to pivot towards the tank, but should they even anticipate ahead of time to be bad next year?
Well, I guess if they're gonna do it, they're gonna have to be very intentional about it, like starting with how they approach the offseason. Mm-hmm. Like, what are you doing with Bruce Brown? Once again, available for any picks right now,
buddy. 2 seconds. I'm ready.
Just email info@hellowelcome.show, man. We'll do the negotiations ourselves.
No problem.
But like, what do they do with Gary? Like, what does the rest of the roster look like around the core guys? Because, like you mentioned, like if they're going to decide and take this direction to try to tank and go for the highest odds, you can't make those decisions like 20 games into the season. Like, it has to be intentional. Like, I think about 2 years ago when they made the moves at the trade deadline and decided to add Jakob, like there was a lot of conversations about how like, oh, they could have ended up sliding back into the lottery and maybe had a chance to move up to get Victor Wembanyama. When we saw what happened last year. So like, it's kind of like a two-part question. Like, aside from like, should they do it? It's like, if they do it, then they have to like start planning for that right away. And is there an appetite from the players, starting with Scotty, to be part of this program of like understanding that this is going to be another season that's going to be wasted from a wins and losses situation, like even for guys like RJ and Emmanuel quickly. Like, I think there's a lot of questions that go into when you think about if you're going to tank beyond just, hey, we're going to just try to lose a lot of games. Like, you have to look at where the organization is. And I really don't know, like with Scotty at this point in his career, with the roster that they have, which is not like a roster that will like blow you away, but it's also not like a roster where you look at where it's like Portland last year or something like that, or Washington, where you're just going to be guaranteed like 15 to 20 wins. So like, if they're going to tank, like they got to like actually think about it and map out a plan.
Yeah, and so let's map out that plan, right? Because if you are going to be intentionally bad and you want the best possible lottery odds, some of the teams at the bottom, Detroit, Washington, right? Like, how are you going to be in the same range of wins as those two teams? And I don't even think it's possible for any team to be in the range of being as bad as Washington is projected to be next year. You know, I don't know what they're going to do in the draft. I don't know what they're going to do in free agency, but I know they will be tanking once again next year, and it'll be very hard to out-tank a Washington Wizards team. It'll be very hard to out-tank a Detroit Pistons team that just lost 28 games in a row last year. Like, that's a mind-blowing stat. And it's also just so sad that the Raptors were the team to snap that streak last year too. But like, it's very difficult. On top of that, like the lottery odds have flattened, right? Like, look at who won the lottery this year. Despite Detroit losing the aforementioned 28 games, despite Washington being just an absolute joke of a franchise, it's the Atlanta Hawks who are in the play-in that ultimately ended up winning the first overall pick. So the flat lottery odds change a lot of that. But to your point, like, yeah, if you are going to preemptively tank, you will absolutely need to, once again, take Jakob Poeltl and somehow make him not be on the roster. Of course, there would be a trade market if you would want to trade Jakob, but it would be really, really weird that you went out of your way to get him, brought him in. There's this whole big discussion about the future of the franchise. Then you pivot, and a year into the contract, you dump him. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's tough, man. Like, it's like you're dumping Jakob twice, which is so funny.
Well,
from a relationship standpoint,
you put it that you put it that way, but I'm also like, business is business. Like
okay, all right.
Situation has changed, and
we got a heartbreaker, Alex Wong. All right,
no,
the situation's changed. We got to dump you again. Like,
I've been cold blooded for 7+ years going, but like, I think if they were really going to think about tanking, then their next move should be to accumulate more draft picks and seeing if they can get more draft picks potentially into the 2025 draft. And maybe it's a scenario where, even if you don't end up, moving up and getting the specific player that you want, if you're not in the top 3, like if you feel good about the draft, is it a situation where maybe you have 2 first-rounders to play with and you're able to get multiple players? I think those decisions just need to be made. Or on the flip side, do you see more upside in your next few moves being to push the timeline more forward? Like, are you trading Bruce Brown and are you trading Jakob for players that can play now with Scotty, with Quickly, and with RJ?
Well, I mean, Jakob is one of the players that can play now with those guys. I think that's where it swings on. And I think, the other thing in terms of if you're pro tank for next year and preemptively pro tank is that, like, you'll have Quickly under contract because he's restricted, and clearly he's been working out a ton with the Raptors. Like, Rep is going to re-sign Quickly, right? It's just a matter of how much the number is, but again, he's going to be ours. RJ's already under contract, and then if they extend Scotty, which they probably will extend Scotty as well in the offseason as well, your main 3 are already locked in. So they don't necessarily get even, you know what I mean? Like, you're not at risk of like alienating those guys in particular. At the same time, though, it really does come down to how much do you believe in those three. Because if you really already like those three guys a lot and believe in their talent, then you probably want to shift your strategy to be able to, take a player who's closer to the range, right? One of the things we talked about so much with the previous core was like, well, like Scotty's like 21 and Pascal's like 28. There's a 7-year gap. Like, are their timelines going to be overlapping, all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, they moved on from Pascal. They moved on from OG, guys like that. They're also about to get very expensive, which, is a clear factor here too. But at the same time, like, let's say you go into the draft and you tank next year. Scotty's going to be 23 and you draft like a 18 or a 19-year-old. You're creating yet another gap where you're waiting for the other guy to catch up, and then hopefully that overlapping enough with your timeline. So if you actually do really, really believe in the core three already, then what you're hoping to do is maybe even use some of those draft picks to take players roughly in their range. Like, I mean, based on who the Raptors have brought in, like, it's not a lot of freshmen that they're working out. It's a lot of guys who are juniors or even seniors that have come through the building and in terms of who's come out to work out. And, that's not necessarily a guarantee that they're going to take somebody in that range. But, like, yeah, I mean, you take somebody who's like 21 rather than someone who's 18 coming into your building, and they fit a lot better with your current timeline. But again, that's dependent on you believing in your current timeline so much that you don't need to go down into the lottery once again and grab more talent. So that's my question to you, Alex. Like, do you believe in this group enough to not have to go through the tanking process for another year?
Like, I believe in this group, but also the problem is, like, when you talk about tanking, like, tanking's never just like a 1-year thing either, though, right? Like, when you're talking about, I think you make a really good point about just like the timing of these guys. Like, if you're going out there and drafting like an 18, 19-year-old, even if he's like a top prospect, like, we know based on like past history, how many of these guys are going to be able to come in and like contribute right away. Like, those are very rare cases. So suddenly you're drafting a player to pair with Scotty and this core group, and suddenly now you have the same issues as before. So for me, it's less about whether I believe in the core. I think just the way that the team has been constructed now around Scotty, it doesn't make sense for them to tank. Like, if you're gonna tank, then to be honest, then you should just tear this whole thing down. Like, you should trade Scotty, get a huge package, and then go into like a multi-year rebuild situation. Like, there's just no, like,
but we're clearly not doing that.
Yeah,
like, we're clearly not doing that.
But give me the history of like teams that are just able to intentionally tank for 1 year and suddenly find themselves in a situation where they've like solved their problems. Like, all of these, like, sure, you can tell me like Victor Wembanyama, like all these like once in a generation.
That was a multi-year process in terms of like that's exactly what we're talking about, right? You'd have to preemptively tear down your roster by trading away Jakob Poeltl. They literally did that.
No, exactly. So there's no tanking. All I'm saying is like the tanking conversation, it can never be looked at in isolation just for 1 year. Like, that's just not how these things happen. Like, if you're tanking, then you are committing to tearing the team down and going in this direction for multiple years. This is just how teams do it. Like, Detroit has been doing it for like a decade now. Like, and then there's certain other teams that kind of climb out of it quicker. So yeah, I think that's the short-sightedness sometimes of the tanking conversation. Like, it's so appealing to think about that the 2025 draft class is loaded maybe with more prospects than this year, and the Raptors finally have a clean draft sheet. They don't owe the Spurs and all this stuff, but it's like, it's one draft isn't gonna solve all the team's problems.
Yeah, I really don't look at the Raptors and say like an 18 or a 19-year-old stepping in is going to be changing their life. Now, having said that, though, like, the flip side, and I'm also like, I actually, I look, it'd be prudent for the Raptors to be bad next year and add more talent, but also at the same time, for me, I don't think it's like particularly realistic for them right now. And I certainly don't think they're going to preemptively tear down their whole roster this summer. But I think for me, the flip side is like, well, then how are you going to get more like star talent, right? Like the reason they got even Scotty to build around in the first place is because they pivoted towards that Tampa tank. And then they got a little lottery luck and they moved up, So, yeah, I mean, how are you going to get that level of talent if you don't end up drafting? Because we know the Raptors obviously aren't going to sign it in free agency either.
Yeah.
So,
it sounds like, Will, the Raptors have found themselves in a situation where they're in that dreaded middle. Yeah.
No,
is what you're saying to me.
I mean, that's exactly it, right? And I think that like maybe in years past, tanking would be more feasible because the lottery odds like were better. But like you look at
Mhm.
it now, like Detroit, for example, who were the worst team in the league, their odds at the number one pick when you have the worst record in terms of like what are your odds to win the first overall pick was 14%.
Mhm.
Same thing
Mhm.
for Washington at 2. You know what I mean? And like in fact, even if you have the worst record like Detroit did, you still have a 48% chance of picking at 5. Right? So like when you flatten the lottery odds that much, it really does disincentivize tanking. But then it does make you to a point where it's like, okay, then how do you get talent on your roster? How
Well,
do you get star level talent? And of course you can make the right trades. And I think the Raptors have done a decent
mhm.
job with the OG trade. The Pascal trade, not so much, but again, who knows? Maybe Bruce Brown can get you some more picks. Please, please, please.
Please, just
Uh
one.
just
Just protect it, man. I don't care.
yeah,
Pick
give us one of those
swap.
fake men.
Just do a pick swap.
Yeah, it's crazy. But like, you know, you can get one through trade. I think the other aspect is like this is where player development. Again, circling back to those main guys, like this is where player development is so key, right? Because the other aspect is you can at least hope to build a superstar, a second superstar, or like a second star to go along with Scotty. And like, I mean, I don't know, quickly. RJ, one of those guys pops to another level. Hopefully, you know what I mean. Yeah, it's man, I don't know. Team building, like the Raptors are in a tough spot. You know what I mean? Like it's not clear cut. Once again, it's not clear cut. Even though the Raptors are in a rebuild, it's still not quite clear cut what they want to do next year and what's the right thing to do. At least in my opinion.
Well, I think you ask about the different ways of getting another star. Like trade has to be the way to go, but you can only get yourself to that point if you have the assets to be able to make the moves, right? So that ties to the player development as well. Like we always use the Kawhi trade as an example, and the Raptors were always in conversations to be able to like land potential star players. Like even in the conversation for Dame last year,
Mm,
because teams looked at the Raptors when they had OG and Pascal on the roster and said that hey, there's a lot of talent here that could be packaged into a superstar player. So like the Raptors have to get back to that. Like, how can they get back to be the team that's in the conversation for when a superstar is looking to move? Like, how do they get into those conversations? Like when a KD is available and like when all these players are always available like every other year. But again,
yeah.
they have to build the talent back up.
Well, that's the thing. Like they're not flush either, because that's the other question. Is like, okay, you can acquire superstar by trade, but you need a lot of like great parts and parts that realistically you can part with. You know what I mean? Like you think
Mm-hmm.
back to when the Raptors were in 2018, they were the number one overall seed in the Eastern Conference. They got swept by LeBron, whatever. But like on their roster at that time, they still had two superstars still in their prime in or not superstars, but two all-stars in Kyle and DeMar DeRozan, who were under contract and also in their prime. You had up and coming young players, a lot of them, right? Fred, Pascal, Jakob, Norm, DeLon, OG, and you had like no bad contracts on your books that was taking a bunch of money. Like I think the veterans on that roster are like JV at 15 and like CJ Miles at like making 8 million or whatever. Like very healthy contracts and very healthy books, and you had all your picks moving forward, at least the first rounders. When they were in that position, they can go out and go get a Kawhi Leonard because you had a again an all-star trade in DeMar DeRozan in his prime under contract, which would have been appealing to a small market franchise like San Antonio. You had assorted prospects to throw away. In this case, they used Jakob. They gave them a first round pick, which they held because they didn't trade away those ahead of time. And then on top of that, they were still able to make the second trade for Marc Gasol because you had a young player under contract in JV who was very reasonable and very able to produce, and you had DeLon, another prospect, to throw in to sweeten the pot. Like you had a position where you can deal from surplus. The Raptors don't have surplus either. So that's where it's like going back to the other conversation. It's just like you might want to just accumulate more picks for the sake of accumulating more picks. Maybe you don't necessarily you tank next year, you get the high pick. You're like, okay, maybe this 18 or 19-year-old doesn't change your life, but at least you can use that to go flip for another star that at least helps in Scotty's current timeline. But man, I don't know. Like to me, it's a good piece by Lewis because it is sort of a question that you could definitely pose, and there is room for debate on the other end. But I mean, where I currently stand, I don't think that it's realistic right now. I think the Raptors are going to roll into the roster, keep the roster as is, maybe add a few like marginal pieces, and then go into the season, see how it works, and then pivot from there. That's been their strategy the last few years, So I don't really see them moving off of that with the same front office. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think that's a good way to kind of wrap up that chat, because yeah, it's keep subscribing to Hello and Welcome, but it might be a bit of a transition year for the Raptors this year. Yeah, they're gonna they're gonna have to figure a few things out this season.
Yeah, for the sake of the pod, I feel like tanking is not the way to go, guys. I feel like we should push it all in. Let's draft Bronny. The amount of clicks we get off of that.
Let's draft Bronny.
What's the thirstiest thing we could do?
We need an NBA GM who only does things for clicks, man.
Yo, seriously, let's hire JJ Redick. Let's draft Bronny. Okay,
he's gonna draft ethical scores only.
Zach Edey. All right, let's take him as well. Let's trade for a second pick. Get Zach Edey more Canadian content. No, honestly, that's the thing with the front office too. They're not really in the habit of making super buzzy moves either. You know what I mean?
No.
The one time they jumped in on it was Kawhi, and what a glorious time it was, man. How'd you celebrate the 5-year anniversary?
I don't know. I think I was recording a pod with you.
God. You know what? That's actually how we celebrated the championship too.
Yeah.
Salute to. I think the pods are still out there, man. We did a 2-hour pod at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, go check those out. But yeah, that does it for us for today, man. Thanks again everyone for listening.
I've once again forced Alex into a conversation about the Raptors when nothing is going on with the team. But that's what we do here on Hello and Welcome podcast. Make sure you continue to rate, review, subscribe to the show. Big ups to our producer Jerome Chang for all the video edits. They look great. Shouts to Amel as well, our producer Amel Delic, who was able to put in a lot of audio edits. I think people who listen on the podcast got to hear, a couple clips spliced in for context, because we usually reference a bunch of things and we never put any context around it. So appreciate everyone working behind the scenes, obviously, here at Hello and Welcome. And thank you for listening, and we'll be back with more episodes this week on the Hello and Welcome podcast presented by Betway.